some of the skills you bring to the table on city council.
You bet. One of the things that I think really allowed me to even just think that I could serve was when I made this choice 8 years ago. One of the things I thought, well, I've been through my MBA program, I've earned my MBA. I think now I can do the work of budgeting and do all these complex kind of approaches to how city government functions. And so I think that's one of the big things that I know gave me the confidence to kind of be able to do the work that we do. But the other thing is, I knew that I wanted to be involved in public service when I would go to public meetings, and I was like really interested, and it was all very interesting to me, and my friends were like, this was so boring. And so I often say that when people come to our city council meetings, and you can kind of tell who's engaged and who's interested. And so I was always that engaged, interested party. And I mean, if you can sit and talk about sewers for 2 hours, then you're probably the right person for city council.
All right, we have skyrocketing housing costs. It's a concern for a lot of our viewers, especially in the Idaho Falls area. Should the city get involved with skyrocketing housing costs? If so, how?
Yeah, so this is one of the top priorities, this and probably keeping our property taxes at a reasonable rate, right? But I will say that housing there needs to be a role for the city, and that role is not to get into the marketplace and kind of dictate anything, but what that role the city should play is being a coordinator of efforts so that we can bring in the nonprofit sector and the work that they're doing to help people who have needs, bring in the developers and talk about what pricing of housing we need, because sometimes right now the prices are so high that we have workers who need places to live and they don't have options. And so if we could help developers see where there's a need, and that can help the developers have tenants when they've got things built. And then the other piece is to allow the contractors as well to be involved, the people who are actually doing the work, because we've had a real lack of construction workers, and that's caused some of the shortages in housing and the ability to actually get it built. So anything that we can do in the nonprofit sector to kind of build the construction trade groups as well, so that we can get more construction workers ready and capable.
Okay, how would you address property taxes for Idaho Falls?
Yeah, so I'll be honest, I've been probably one of the leading voices. I've voted against more budgets than I voted for in my 8 years, mostly because I've been trying to make the point that we're at a point in the city's budget where we need to find a way to control spending around our full-time employees. We have too many full-time employees, and they're not always in the right place. And that growth has happened over time by good decision makers, by making good decisions largely at the time, but things change over time. But the positions never go away, and then we have all these costs associated with that. We need to relook at that, and we need to control the growth in full-time employees and make sure that that we're stable for all of our employees, so that we can treat our employees really well, give them competitive wages and have the benefits they need, but have less of them, and then find a way to move forward from there. The other way we can help keep property tax low is work with the state legislature and increase the homeowners exemption, because our tax levy is actually lower today than it was when I took office. The tax levy when I took office was 0.0008, and now it's 0.005. It's like almost half. But the dilemma is our values of our houses have went from $100,000 or $150,000 on average to almost $400,000. So people are paying more taxes on what used to be exempt, right? Mm-hmm. So personally, my home, I used to only pay taxes on about $60,000 or $80,000 worth of my home's value, but now my house is worth way more, and now I'm paying $200,000 or $300,000 against that levy. Luckily, the levy's way lower, and so my taxes went up 18 or 20%. Mm-hmm. But if the levy wouldn't have been lower, if we wouldn't have controlled the spending in the city, then we could have had really astronomical rates as well. So I think we're fortunate that we've been able to have growth that's helped spread the cost of property tax. But now we need to get the state legislature to increase that homeowners exemption so that we can have people paying their fair share from their home. Right? If their home's worth $300,000, the exemption maybe should be half instead of just a number. Right now, that number's capped at $125,000. So if you're a young family and you have a $400,000 average home price, you have a lot of taxes you're paying against, when before it was really, you're only paying for $50,000 or $60,000 against that levy.
Okay. You're kind of leading right into my next question. You've been mentioning growth. How would you manage growth in Idaho Falls?
Well, I think what everyone needs to understand is that we need to be a viable city, but we need to grow with intelligence. And we also need to balance people's property rights versus the community that's already here, right? So if someone owns property, they have every right to develop it. And we wouldn't want to live in a society where that's not true, right? And if they follow the rules around development, then we make sure that happens. Where we can have the intelligence around development is by making the rules smart to begin with, so that the people have to live by those rules. And one of the things that we did that's really started to help limit growth is we introduced impact fees. And impact fees make it so that people have to pay for growth when they come and develop in the city. So if you build a home in the city, you're going to pay an impact fee now, so that so that there's money for new roads, and then for new parks and new trails, and new police officers and new police cruisers. And that should help control the growth, so that we have smart growth over time that can be paid for with the people who are developing.
So you would keep going with the impact fees?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you think the city of Idaho Falls needs to make spending cuts? And I know you spoke to this a little bit, but more specifically, where? Areas that you can think of.
So I think everything's on the table when you're up against it in budget, and we make those choices every year. But the top priorities are first responders and safety. The reason we gather together as people in cities is so that we can have the protection of our police and our fire departments and the ambulances. And so we don't want to cut any services there. So after that, I think everything's on the table. And I think you look at the changing needs of the community, and sometimes you need to cut services that are no longer being used, or being used not as heavily as they once were. I don't have any specific examples, but I will say that the other way that we've been looking at saving money is not hiring people, but contracting some of our work, so that we don't have to pay the benefits and the perceived benefits, all the things that it costs to employ someone for a long period of time. And then we can sometimes see savings from doing that through the contractors who might. A good example of this is we, instead of hiring kids to mow our lawns everywhere through the city, we have contracted with local landscaping companies and did bids competitively so that we could get the lowest price, and that saved the city some money.